Shalom and welcome to the Middle East Report. In this programme today we'll be focusing on one charity that's making a huge difference in rescuing food and providing that food to those in need in the Holy Land. Warm welcome to the programme, and today's guest is all the way from Israel. His name is Gidi Kroch, and you are the CEO of Leket, Israel. Gidi, can you just give us a little bit of a story about your background growing up in Israel and how you had a passion for kind of business and running NGOs?
So it's really actually a funny story. Well, I'm an Israeli. I grew up in Israel, and at a young age I moved to Canada with my family and came back to Israel after several years. And when I started my young family, we moved to the US as well, and I worked in the US for 7 years. My youngest was born in the US, and in 2007 we came back to Israel. We decided that's where we want to live, and that's important for us to come back to Israel and not stay in the US. And then I kind of was looking for a job I had to provide for my family, and I found online an advertisement saying that they're looking for an operations manager, and I applied. And through the application process, I talked to one of my wife's relatives, which at the time he was the CEO of IKEA in Israel. And he said, well, start working there for a year and get your network together again and leave within a year. And 12 years later, I'm sitting here and talking to you. So it's an interesting story. And it really caught me, I think, the thing about nonprofits. It's a totally different aspect of business and how we work together. We're an organization, we're nonprofits, we're a social organization, we rescue food. But at the end of the day, we also have to run and operate like a business where we have to measure and control what we're doing in order to be able to sustain for a long while, and that's very important for us as well.
You run an absolutely extraordinary organisation, Gidi, and making such a huge difference. But can you share with our viewers the work of Leket and what you do in terms of saving food and giving it to the poor and hungry in Israel?
So Leket is actually a gleaning organization. We glean, and glean is a biblical term. Of course, it's one of the 3 mitzvot we have to do. And we rescue food from farmers. We rescue food from hotels, from catering services, from any food service actually that we can get our hands on. And we bring that to the poor. So for instance, in the farming businesses, we work with farmers, about 500 farmers all over Israel. And we ask them if there is any leftover, if there's any food to rescue, meaning if something they have not picked, that we can go and pick it or collect it from the packing house and bring it over to our warehouse and then redistribute it to nonprofits and people that we work with. And similar to that is the meal rescue program. We work with hotels industry. The Israeli IDF, interestingly enough, is our biggest supporter. We rescue about 50,000 meals only from the army, 50,000 meals a month, which is huge for us. And taking into account that they only joined about 4 or 5 years ago, that's tremendous growth by the army. And we're the bottleneck there. The army is actually waiting for us to open more army bases that we can collect food from. So all this food that we're collecting from, let's say, the army or from hotel services that we're collecting from, we bring to soup kitchens all over Israel that feed the needy population. And of course, the needy, Israel is very, there's different communities, Ethiopian community, Russian community, all different communities, and each community has its own way and habit of eating. So we have to know intimately who we're supplying the food to in order to make the difference. And it does make a difference. I can share a story of a school in the south that we're supplying food to. It's food that we rescue in Eilat. Eilat is like the Riviera of Israel. And we collect 1,500 meals every day. And some of it goes to a school in Ofakim, which is a city in the south. And when we started the program about 3 years ago, the kids for the first day didn't want to eat it. They said, what are we, second grade citizens that we get leftovers? What they didn't know is that was hotel food from Eilat, and that's very expensive and good food. So the first day they didn't go in, they just watched. The second day it trickled, and the third day everyone came to eat. And the impact of it was tremendous because attendance went up in a very short while, violence went down in the school, and grades went up. And then Ben Gurion University came in with extracurricular activities. And high-tech around the city went with tutoring. And the Israeli army have teachers, and they sent Israeli army teachers to teach the kids. So everything happened because of the food being the anchor. And we know now that after 4 years, we started with the organization, with working there with the school, and after 4 years, most of the kids enlisted to the army there because they could study, because they had a better understanding, and that's the impact of the food, which is very, very important for us. At the end of the day, we're rescuing food. We're bringing food from where there's a surplus to where there's a shortage. But the impact the food does is tremendous. It's all about food and what food can do as an anchor.
Excellent. So let's have a look now at some of the extraordinary work being carried out by Leket in Israel.
Many nations shall come and say, "Come, and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways, and we shall walk in his paths. For out of Zion the law shall go forth, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem."
In this place where we are standing, a variety of vegetables are being grown today. Cucumbers, peppers, and tomatoes. But not only vegetables are grown here. In this place, hope also grows. In 2016, we were blessed with a generous donation from the hands of our wonderful Christian friends, and we were able to purchase this land here in northern Israel. Thanks to this contribution, we at Leket Israel are able to grow vegetables that are distributed to the schools, soup kitchens, and other organizations feeding the poor. It is important for us at Leket Israel to be able to grow our own produce, which provides a continuous supply of healthy food, even in periods when the amount of food donations decreases. Not only that, today we can decide what to grow depending on the nutritional deficiencies that the hungry face.
These 10 acres of agricultural land grow 500 tons of vegetables each year, which goes to feed 2,700 needy people throughout Israel every day.
It makes me happy to come here and help with the harvesting. This is the least I can do so that no child in Israel will remain hungry today.
Every day, volunteers come to this field, not only from Israel, but from around the world. Groups of Christians who visit the Holy Land donate their time and visit Leket Israel to help us harvest the produce. There is no doubt that without the general support of the Christian communities worldwide, it would not have been possible for us to purchase land in Israel and be able to cultivate fresh vegetables to supply to the poor.
It really warms my heart.
All the agricultural produce is brought here to the Leket Israel Logistics Center by our dedicated Leket drivers.
Everyone here are volunteers who come to sort the produce that Leket Israel brings to its logistics centre every day. They make sure that only the best fruit and vegetables will arrive on the dining room tables in the soup kitchens.
It's exhilarating for me to stand here and see how the seeds we planted in the field grew and brought with them all this abundance. The farmers who care for the land, the drivers, the volunteer groups, and especially the great Christian supporters all put a smile on the face of an Israeli who is so in need of food.
Vegetables and fruit from all over Israel are sorted and packaged and sent on their way.
The long journey that these vegetables took from the fields ends here at one of Leket Israel's 200 non-for-profit partners.
I've been very impressed by the level of food that Leket gives and helps support these social programs.
Every child or adult who needs a hot meal knows that every day, thanks to the donors, they will not remain hungry.
We happen to have one individual who is in level 3 leukemia. He lost 1/3 of his body weight and he's eating 3 meals a day. Of course, thanks to Leket, Without them, we wouldn't have the food that people need in order to survive.
In Hebrew, there is one word with a very strong meaning. The word is mitzvah. The meaning of the word is a good deed whose essence is helping others out of a love for God and not for reward. The mitzvah done by our Christian partners around the world is a testament to the special relationship between the two peoples. Thank you again to my dear friends.
I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you.
And we can see from that fantastic video there the incredible work being carried out by Leket in feeding the poor and the hungry in Israel, and how Christians are getting alongside this organisation to really help make a difference in the lives of so many Israelis. Gidi, now you were telling me when we're showing that video that this is a kind of personal story for you, and that that your mother is a Holocaust survivor who also went hungry, so you can identify with those Israelis, and particularly the children that go hungry. Can you share something of why this is so important to you personally?
I can. I mean, it's an emotional and very, in a sense, it's a very sad story. My mother is a Holocaust survivor. She survived the Holocaust, and a Christian family in Poland near Kroch, where she grew up, hid her after she had to flee with her parents, and her parents perished. And my mother's now 83 years old. And she brought us up in a certain way. And I think what I'm doing now in my work, through the emotional part of my story, is kind of like closing a circle, because my mom, she suffered hunger. She suffered hunger throughout the war, and with a family that hit her, sometimes they could feed her, sometimes they couldn't. So she knows all about hunger, and she knows about survival. So when I work, and actually she told me years ago, even before I started the organization, working in the organization, something that I couldn't grasp, but now I can, is that a hungry kid is a hungry kid. And for me specifically, supplying food or feeding kids is kind of like a very emotional part of what I do. And I think when emotion with professionalism goes together, then it's a success. And I can see that in Leket. And I took my mom once to Peking, and I took her once to see what would work. And she couldn't she couldn't stay there for so long, because it reminded her of her past, and it brought her all these memories, a flood of memories back. So I just had to show her, and we had to go away, because she couldn't, I don't want to say couldn't stand it anymore, but it was too emotional for her. But she really, I think, accepts and is very, very happy that I found my way back to supporting people, and that's kind of like closing a circle.
Amazing. And can you share with us how Leket as an organisation developed, and certainly something about the founder, Joseph Gittler, that we saw in the last video?
Absolutely. Joseph actually immigrated to Israel in 2000, and in 2003 he opened the organization. In the time in between, he was working in a family-owned business. But he saw the social gap there, and he saw the gap especially between the rich and the poor, and the hungry, and the hunger going on in Israel. And in 2001, there was a big economical problem in the world, in all the world itself. And it increased in Israel as well. And he said that he has to do something. So he started with his own small Subaru, collecting food from any family or any other event that he could, and bring it to local shelters in Ra'anana, where he is. And interestingly enough, after a while, his wife said, either take it seriously or close it down, because it's a mess. You turn my garage into a mess. And lucky for all of us and for all the beneficiaries, he said, okay, I'm taking it seriously. And we started working he started working in a small, very, very small coop chicken, which was converted into a small warehouse. And I joined in 2007. And at the time we were doing I would say about 200 tons of food when I joined in 2007. And today we're doing 1,500 tons of food a month, which is a great growth. And Joseph is still our leader, and he's an entrepreneur, and he always has ideas of what to do. And he's, I think, a great leader in food rescue, and also with his touch and with his connection to the poor in Israel and their plight. He's very much connected, and he very much works with everyone. And it's amazing to see him after 20 years or so still has a passion, as if he just started the organization yesterday.
Amazing. Can you share with many of our viewers, because when we look at Israel today, we know that Israel's gone from when it first started as a nation reborn as an agricultural economy. Now it's very much a high-tech economy. And in many ways, the GDP of Israel is taking over so many and out-competing many countries in the European Union. So why is there such a big poverty gap in Israel despite the recent economic growth in the nation?
I think there's a big social gap in Israel, and it's growing. Israel is considered a high-tech nation. We have a lot of high-tech going, and a lot of people in Israel getting paid a lot of for their work, which is fine, which is okay. It's great. There's a lot of companies that are doing what's called exits and being sold to other companies. But on the other hand, there's not enough attention being brought over to the poverty in Israel. And that creates a big social gap. The prices in Israel are very high as well for food. There's a small amount of families that own about 80% of the businesses, the food business in Israel. And when it's controlled by such a small group, then of course the prices can be and are higher in Israel relatively to other countries as well. So I think that's why there's poverty in Israel. And for the first years, you have to remember that Israel is a country that is surrounded by its enemies. We do have peace with Jordan and with Egypt. It's a very cold type of peace. But we were struggling. Israel was struggling as a nation to start. Where do we start with? So security and defense took the first part of it, and it still is the most important part of what we do. So we had to put a lot of resources there. So a lot of resources were put in there, hoping that other things will happen as well. But it just, as now that we're just over 70 years old, and that's how old Israel is as a country, now we have to look back and catch up with social services as well. I think it will happen, but still there's the question of when, and still, when we talk percentages, I always say, well, I don't want to be in that percentage. Nobody wants to be in a percentage of the people that are poor, because even one poor family in Israel is so sad to be in this position. But it is a growing social gap at the moment. The government in Israel is now starting to take more measures into this, and we see a small but significant change within the government, and hopefully we can do more. And again, we saw earlier that the support we're receiving from the Christian community is amazing, and it still befounds me how much love we're getting now from the Christian community at all. Just this field that we were talking about that was purchased to us by our friends in the Christian community is something great. Supporting 2,700 families throughout the day, every day it's amazing. It's amazing what can be done, and amazing what can be done with food rescue.
Absolutely. So let's have a look at this wonderful video produced by Leket that shows how they supply the biggest food banks in Israel.
יאללה, מהר, יש לנו 10 דקות. מה אתה עושה? מצאתי פה תפוחים במגירה, רוצה קצת? עזוב את התפוחים! צודק, גם אני יותר טיפוס של ענבים. תתחיל לעבוד! בסדר. מה זה? הכל פה אוכל. איפה הכסף? ממש נורא. שערוריה.
How can I help you?
Stop! This is a shod!
Take all the food you need. That's what we do here at the Leket Food Bank.
שוב food bank.
Leket Israel is the national food bank. We collect fresh, surplus food throughout Israel.
אני לא קונה את זה.
אתה לא צריך לקנות. In this bank, all the food is distributed for free. Every day, dozens of trucks leave here to bring food to hundreds of thousands of people who cannot afford it themselves all across the state of Israel.
כל כך יפה מצדכם. באמת מרגש. זה בסדר לבכות. אני לא בוכה, זה הבצל. טוב, יאללה, תעמיס הכל ובוא נזוז מפה.
זה בסדר?
למה אתה שואל אותו בכלל? סליחה, הוא עדיין מתלמד.
That's all right. We are always replenishing our stock of fresh food since you always need more.
מי זאת מור? ומאיפה תשיגו עוד מזון?
Luckily, Leket has hundreds of dedicated food donors who partner with us to provide food for Israel's needy, and we love all of them.
קדדת לי את הלב. מיסטר אינגליש, תראה, שודדים אתכם.
It's okay. These are our trucks on their way to feeding everyone in need throughout the country. With your generous support, we will continue to fill our bank to deliver fresh, healthy food to those who need it most. אנו זקוקים לכם. בעזרתכם נספק ארוחות נוספות למשפחות רבות.
מיסטר אינגליש, איפה כל העובדים? אתה תמיד לבד פה?
לא, יש לנו אירוע על ילדים באופקים. כל העובדים שלנו בדרך לשם.
תגיד, בינינו, איפה אתם מחביאים את הדובדבנים?
That was a really nice cartoon showing the really good work being done by Leket there. Gidi, can you share with us maybe some actual figures at the extent of the food waste in Israel and how much Israel is wasting in terms of food?
Okay, so we do a study, an annual study, it's a national report. It doesn't talk specifically about Leket, only at the end we tell our story, what we do, very short. But we aimed it to be the first report that actually gives information what is going on with food waste and food rescue, and it caught on, and now everyone is quoting in the government, in the private sector, everyone is quoting this report. And what we saw and what we found when we did this research with a big consulting firm is that 20 billion shekels, or equivalent to about, I would say, about 4 billion pounds of food is destroyed annually in Israel. That's about 1.6% of the GDP in Israel. That's a huge amount of food that is stolen, that is wasted in Israel. If you look at the numbers and you understand really why it's so high, if you look at the social gap in Israel and you look at the amount of food required to solve the food insecurity or the hunger in Israel, we're talking about food at the value of 3 billion shekels. So on one hand, we're throwing away 20 billion shekels worth of food. On the other hand, we need only 3 billion. So we're throwing away 6 times the amount of food. Now, if you look at it in percentage-wise, we're very much like any Western country in the world. About 35% of the food is wasted and thrown away in Israel, but there's a big but to this, and Israel is such a small country. I mean, you can drive up from the south up to the north and back to the south in one day easily. And we're such a small country with so much food going on and concentration of agriculture as well, we can rescue a lot of food. So I think that's the biggest challenge that we have in this, that we're throwing away so much food when we could actually divert this and bring it to the people in need. There are people really in need in Israel, and it's just shameful and a waste to throw this away. I mean, look at what we're named, Leket, gleaning, bring it to the poor, collect from the fields and bring it to the poor, the surplus of the food. That's the actual word or meaning of gleaning. And I think we can do a lot more in this aspect.
And can you share with us the biblical scripture? I think I've got it here in front of me in Leviticus chapter 19, verses 9 to 10. It says, "Now when you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap to the very corners of your field, nor shall you gather the gleanings of your harvest, nor shall you glean your vineyard, nor shall you gather the fallen fruit of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the needy and for the stranger. I am your God." And that's from Leviticus 19, verses 9 to 10. So what you're doing really is the 21st century equivalent of that command in Leviticus.
Absolutely, and I think we're doing it like hands-on, exactly what it says there, because we're actually gleaning the fields, the surplus, the leftover that's there, and bringing it to the people in need. And so in the Bible it also says that we shouldn't waste. Bal tashmid, it says in Hebrew. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to take what's out there that has zero value for the current owner and turning it into full value of the person in need. And that's exactly what we mean by going from bringing the food from the surplus to where it's required. And that's exactly, I mean, the story of Leket is such an inspiring story in a sense, but it all comes back to the Bible. The Bible already, it was said in the Bible. There's nothing new in what we're doing except maybe the transportation, which is new, right? They didn't have at the time. They didn't have these machines that we're using today. But the idea of it, the idea of Leket, since the day of the Bible, that's how we as a community, I think, also survived in a way in caring for each other. And that's what Leket is also trying to do.
And of course, the most famous story about gleaning of all is the amazing story of Ruth and Naomi in the Bible, which Christians actually love that story. And those who love Israel, follow Ruth's example. How much is the story of Ruth an inspiration to you, Gidi, and the work that you do through Leket?
Well, I think it's exactly what we do in a sense as well. It's not only the gleaning, but it's bringing it to the poor. And Ruth and Naomi were very poor where they were and moved to Israel because they heard that it's a land of plenty. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to bring the plentiful food that we have and bring it to the poor. So it is an inspiration for us. And actually, we discuss this quite a lot around Shavuot, which is the holiday, and that's when the story of Ruth is discussed.
So let's have a look now at this excellent report produced by CBN that is called News on Leket, and this gives a Christian perspective on the great work being done by Leket in feeding so many in Israel.
Leket is Hebrew for gleaning, and that's exactly what this Israeli charity organization is doing. Volunteers from Israel and abroad give their time to glean fields and orchards. They pick fresh fruits and vegetables that are later distributed to the poor. Leket Israel leader Gidi Kroch points to the Bible as the inspiration for this project.
The idea of gleaning originally is biblical. It's part of how you treat the poor and the needy, the Jewish way to treat the poor and the needy. You leave a section of the field and then the poor and the needy can come in. That's the original biblical sense of Leket.
One biblical example is Ruth, who gleaned in the fields of Boaz. Kroch says after some 2,000 farmers harvest their crops, they allow the volunteers to glean the fields. Each month, volunteers pick some 500 tons of grade A produce. It's then distributed to organizations which help the needy. Recently, Leket organized a day of gleaning for the whole family. At least 1,500 volunteers gathered 10 tons of butternut squash and 15 tons of oranges. That produce will reach about 5,000 needy Israelis.
It's quite a nice number, but there's a lot of needy people that are looking for it.
Youth groups, soldiers, employees of big companies, and even Christian groups from overseas are among the 50,000 volunteers who hit the fields for a day each year. Project manager Yedidia Rosenberg helps show volunteers how to pick and says they learn more than just working in the field.
It educates people to give and to open their eyes to what's happening around them and to give to other people.
One family brought more than 35 family members and friends to Israel for vacation.
We all decided that one day of our vacation we wanted to spend and be part of the country, be part of Israel, and do something with the land that we can help the people.
Heffer says it's exciting for young and old alike.
It's an experience. It's work, you see. We wind up being in the heat and sweating and enjoying it. We came with our children. We have, people of all ages, from, babies till grandfathers.
11-year-old Devorah Lowinger says helping makes her happy.
I'm picking fruits and vegetables to give to the poor people. It makes me feel so good that I can help people and that they can get stuff that they can't get.
Kroch says that besides feeding the poor, gleaning helps Israelis reconnect to their agricultural roots.
It makes people happy, and that's why a lot of people come, I think, also, because it talks about the old values in the past that we had in the past, working the fields, connecting to the land itself, connecting to Israel, which is very important for us.
Rosenberg says the most important thing is working together to help others.
I think the most important thing is a combination of also a big charity project that's helping thousands of people all over Israel under the poverty line with the most basic fruit and vegetables and other foods that people need, with a combination of using of volunteers that can really come here and contribute, and it also, as I said, is an educational program.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News.
And a great report there produced by Chris Mitchell. And it's great to see so many families there helping in the fields collect those buttersquash for those in need in Israel. Gidi, I have to ask you, what is the size of your operation? Because you said in that report there that you have 50,000 volunteers. I think it is 110 full-time staff. This is a major logistics operation to get all this food out to those who need it all across Israel. How do you manage that?
So first of all, the numbers, of course, they change. We attempt to grow every year, and this year we're going to do 16,000 tons of only fresh produce, which is 16 million kilograms of fresh produce, and another 2.4 million meals. We'll see how this year ends in terms of meals. So we're serving a very large population, but it's a very complex logistics. If you look at it again from 40,000 feet and above, then you see it's basically taking with a surplus, and what's the problem? Put it on a truck, drive it down, and you deliver it to where there's a need. But you have to conform with certain standards because you're dealing with food, and you have to make sure that all this logistics flows flawlessly. If I can give one example in this, is if a farmer calls us up and says, okay, I have a field of tomatoes, you can come pick it up tomorrow. If we don't show up tomorrow like we said we would, the next day, and we want to show up the next day, I'll say, I'm sorry, this was my business, this is my business, I've turned over the land and the tomatoes are gone. So we have to be very, very precise in the way that we run this, precise with the farmers, precise with the people that we serve, with the agencies, with the soup kitchens that we work with. So it's pretty complex, and I have to say that we have good, very, very good people, very, very dedicated people that want to do this, see it not only as a job or a profession that they do, but they also see the value and the passion that drives them is really to feed the people.
And how much does your organisation also educate the Israeli public about wasting food? How much does that play a part in the work that you do?
I think it's an important part. Food waste is a growing trend, or rescuing food is a growing trend in the world in itself. And in Israel, we with these two operations that we have are very unique. They don't exist in these scales anywhere else in the world. So awareness for us is very, very important. If we get more people to know what Leket is all about, if we get more people to participate in the programs that we have, then we'll probably get, at the end of the day, even more funding for the programs. But that also reminds me, there's a proverb, and I'll say it in Hebrew, of course, it's a Ki mitzion tetzeh Torah. And it means that Israel will actually export and teach the world on things to do. And I'm taking part in the Global Food Banking Network sessions when they happen all over the world. But interestingly enough, a few days ago, I was contacted by the food bank in Turkey that they want to start working and collecting food from hotels. So who do they go to? They approached us, Leket Israel, and I'm flying off to a seminar in Turkey in the end of October to teach them about how to save food from hotels. So it's another way, and I think that was also Joseph's dream in this, is to help educate the world in food waste and food rescue. As complex as it is, it can be done in every country.
Oh, absolutely. Can you share some, you shared an incredible story at the beginning of the program, how you helped to really provide food for this school that made a big difference in the south of Israel. But how have you been able to help families that are very much on the poverty line in Israel with meals and food? And what sort of feedback do you get from those that you help?
So this is interesting as well. I mean, we're doing studies all the time and to see what our impact is. And one of the things that we've learned is that the first thing that people will drop when they don't have enough money to provide for food, they'll stop purchasing fruit and vegetables, which is very, very important for us as people, and nutritionally wise, it's extremely important for us. So when we supply this deficiency, when we supply this gap and provide them with the fresh produce, and it actually helps them, and the impact is great. And we're supplying them to families, of course. So we have to know, again, intimately who we're supplying to. If it's families, it's one type of food. If it's not, if it's seniors, it's another type of food. And so we have to know exactly who the population is and what their needs are, and this is what we're doing to supply them. I think the impact is something that is at times difficult to measure, but we're getting feedback from a lot of people. We have for instance, seminars, nutritional seminars that our staff gives, and it's workshops. It's actual workshops, hands-on workshops that we provide for the poor. And we follow up within half a year. And a year after, we follow up to see what was the impact of that. And it's very interesting and very heartwarming to see that people have changed their habits, their eating habits, because of these seminars. More people and more buy into the fresh produce and eat more fresh produce, less of the manufactured type of food, which is less nutritional. And now we're having a seminar with children, where children and parents come, and we've even got responses from children and pictures of children cooking at home and helping their parents in this. So there's a lot to say about these education and families and what this can do.
And can you share where the food goes? You mentioned food banks. It goes to food banks, the homeless. Does it go to schools? Does it also go to soldiers in the IDF as well that come from poor backgrounds?
It does. We provide to everyone. We work with different organizations throughout Israel, and some of them do help directly lone soldiers, old soldiers in serious economical situations, which is very sad for us to see. Like a soldier he's providing the safety, the defense for the country in one hand, on the other hand, when he goes back home, sometimes he doesn't even have where to go back home. So he stays in some kind of a shelter or a place, or I know of stories of soldiers that stay in the army base because there's food there and at home there's not. So we work with these organizations that supply food to these lone soldiers or soldiers that need as well. And also to the elderly. It's another program that we run directly, and we feed elderly in government housing that they have no food. And the food is being an anchor. And it supplies them with, of course, the nutrition part of it, but also a lot of socialization happens around the food. So they come before they sit together, they come out, they sit together after the meal, and suddenly they're socializing one with each other, which did not happen before the food was there. So we're supplying a lot of food to many, many people, and I think at the end we're making an impact.
Fantastic. One of Leket's big achievements so far last year, according to my notes here, was to have an impact on Israeli legislation known as the Food Donation Act. Tell us about this bill and how it's had an impact in Israel.
So this bill is actually, it is available or is around in 5 other countries. Israel is the 6th country to have this bill come or have this bill at all. And it took about 3 years to get this together. We had to work with the different ministries, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Justice, to get this bill on the road. And we had a lot of push at the end and a lot of friends in the Israeli parliament that did help us to push this law along. And in last November, at the end of October of last year, it did pass in the Israeli parliament, and now it's part of the Israel legislation. The impact of it was tremendous in food. We had, overnight almost, we had 70 companies that called us and want to participate in food rescue. Amazing. Big companies, big national or government-controlled companies, they're not even there. Big private companies that were hesitant before because they didn't have like a legal umbrella to cover if something happens. God forbid something happens. We hope nothing happens, and to date nothing has happened. But this gives them the umbrella, the legal umbrella, to cover if something does happen. And it was very important for us to pass. It also had a big awareness part of it, and we're happy that it did. But 70 companies that wanted to join, and we haven't reached full support for all of them yet. We've chosen the first biggest companies that we can work with, and gradually we're working down the list. And of course, as I said, the IDF in itself would love us to open more bases. It's just a matter of logistics.
Fantastic. So let's have a look at another wonderful Leket video, and this time they're in an orange grove.
Through donated farmers' fields to collecting leftover food from restaurants and banquet halls, Leket Israel is able to distribute a weekly average of 735,000 pounds of nutritious food to over 200 nonprofit organizations across Israel.
God tells us in His Word that we should bless Israel. And that's one of the amazing things about supporting Leket is that you're directly supporting an Israeli charity. And so the monies are going directly there and doing just practical things right there on the ground.
Paul talks about that in Romans chapter 9 at the beginning. He talks about the fact that they brought us the whole concept of what it is to be a son of God, the adoption. It talks about the worship that has been given to us through the Jewish people, the scriptures. It even talks about our Savior Jesus as a Jew who was given to us.
You know, our whole church family, they know that our giving to Leket is feeding 140,000 people a week. I don't know how often others get to be part of something so significant and so awesome, but we're so honored to be part of that.
I think one of the amazing things about having people come alongside of you and tell you and make you aware of things that you just haven't thought about. And that's what I have seen has been amazing about getting to know Ray and Rosalind. As I've gotten to know them over the last couple of years, I have only seen just people with character and integrity and a heart for the church, both locally and abroad, and a heart for Israel. And I think that they have just a great combination of those qualities put together. And so when they come to your church and speak on behalf of Israel, it'll come out of that.
Remembering the poor is a very important thing. In fact, when Paul was meeting with the Jerusalem pillars of the faith, and he was about to go to the Gentiles, they said, don't forget the poor. And he said, well, I won't forget. It's already in my heart to do that. But we sometimes don't have it in our hearts to do that.
They do a great job of recovering food and providing food, and it's an honor and a great blessing to be a part of it. So come join us and be part of something that's making a significant difference in the nation of Israel.
This is an orange grove that Leket Israel is looking after. It's 1,600 trees.
All the trees in this orchard are grafted, and what it means that we took a root system from a citrus tree that is very immune to diseases and it's got a very good root system. And on top of that, we connected a citrus tree that gives a good clementines, but it's not as immune to the diseases in the soil. And the result is a tree that immunes to diseases and actually gives good fruit.
We need your help to sponsor a tree to help bring life to Israelis in need. Your donation and your support will enable a tree to yield 600 pounds of clementines and oranges. Please partner with us today. God bless you.
It's great to see so much Christian support there for Leket and the work that they do in Israel. I have to ask you, Gidi, what personal satisfaction do you get out of being the operations director, the CEO of Leket, knowing that you're making such a huge difference in the lives of thousands and thousands of people across Israel?
Well, it connects back to my personal story in this. I mean, I was in business for many, many years. And I think going back to Israel and finding this different position, something which I had not worked in any type of this business, if we can call it a business, nonprofit organizations, food rescue, food at all. I made a tremendous impact on me and my family. And of course, the personal satisfaction is amazing. There's so much satisfaction in what we do when I see that we can go to a school and help the kids there, or we can go to an elderly shelter and help these elderly that are, you know, in the third part of their life or in the last years of their life, and we can actually alleviate some of the problems that they have. And one of the most significant problems is food. there's a tremendous feeling of success and achievement in this. And it's not only me. I think working in Leket is a passion. We're all passion-driven there. Without that, I mean, it's not the same as working in a business. It fills you up every day. Every day you feel that you can conquer the world, that you want to conquer the world. You want to do it. You want to do more than what you can because it's out there. So it's a great personal feeling, and I share it with all the employees, 110 employees that we have in Leket. From me to the drivers to the people in the field, we all have the same passion, and we all see the gratifying part of it as well.
And what do you think Leket can teach our nation in terms of food waste? Because I'm pretty sure that the percentage of food waste and the money that is wasted in this nation is far higher than that in Israel.
Well, I think, first of all, it shows that there's a lot of food waste. Everywhere in the Western country, there's a lot of food waste, and you have to do something about it. There's a lot of things actually going on in this nation with food rescue as well. Israel is different. We have a different climate. It's a different type of agriculture that in Israel as well. But I think overall, the passion for food rescue, the passion, the drive to feed more people, the need for the food itself is something that we can certainly discuss and certainly find the ways even to cooperate in this. Just talking about several issues with people in the UK and sharing the information we have has brought in many programs. I mean, now I was meeting with people and they were asking me, I mean, how do you get the hotel industry involved in this? And so I shared our story, how we got this, and gave them a few pointers. Maybe something will come out of it, and the hotel industry will start delivering food as well, or donating food, or donating their surplus to the people in need. There's a whole lot that can be done, and in Israel, we're like a pilot program maybe for the rest of the world. We'd like to share the information that we have, and it's interesting what can be done from it.
And that's something I love about Israel, always thinking about others, always thinking how they can be a blessing unto the nations. And that's one thing I love about your nation and your people, is this constantly thinking, how can we make the world a better place? And that's exactly what you do. But in terms of our viewers, if our viewers are watching and are inspired by today's program, and inspired by what you've said, Gidi, how can they get involved and how can they support the work of your organisation?
Well, first of all, I think there's two ways to do it. First is if you're visiting Israel, when you come and visit Israel, come and stay some time with us, spend some time with us. Share the feeling of being out in the fields and collecting the food that is going to really the people in need in Israel, that Leket Israel provides for them. So that's an experience, I think, in working the land of Israel in this, it's an experience that you won't get anywhere. Just the feeling, the atmosphere around it, and the support you'll receive from us, and knowing where it's going to. The second thing is, of course, financially support. However a small or large donation, everything helps. A meal costs us less than 60 pence to deliver. So I think a financial donation would certainly help and go a long way, especially that that it's food rescue and it's helping the people in need.
What you do is absolutely extraordinary. And it wasn't until I started researching what you do at Leket to understand the magnitude of the organisation, the reach of the organisation, the logistics involved. It's absolutely incredible. And to think also you're making such a difference in the lives of so many people in Israel that are on the poverty line that need this food urgently just to survive. What are the lessons that we could learn from the work that you're doing in terms of Christians supporting Israel and the Jewish people?
First of all, I want to say that Christian support for Israel, for Leket, is growing tremendously. I mean, just the field that we have in the north, and day in and day out, we're getting donations. So there's a change also that we feel with this Christian support that we're receiving, and it is a blessing for this. I think what you can learn from this, or what we can, maybe what we can all learn from this, that it's possible. It's possible to make a change in the life of people. You have to be passionate about it. You have to know what you're doing too. You have to be very, very respective and very ethical in the way that you're doing. I think these are lessons that are out there, and you know, maybe I'm going a little bit to the faith side in this and saying that all the lessons that are in the Bible, we just need to read it and understand what the meaning of it, and it's all out there. It's nothing new. It's just taking it and modernizing it in a way that we can actually all do it together.
And within 30 seconds, Gidi, would you like to put a plea to our viewers about why they need to support the incredible work of Leket?
Absolutely. Leket is, firstly and foremost, we're there for the needy people. And if you can support us, a meal to deliver to a child in school or to an elderly person in a home is probably around 3 shekels, which is about 50, 60 pence. If you can support us in this and you can help us in this financially, these people will be blessing you. We're just the delivery guys, but you'll be blessed.
Gidi, I just want to thank you so much for being my guest on today's Middle East Report, and Toda Rabah for the incredible work that you're doing in making such a huge difference in the lives of thousands of Israelis who are living on the poverty line, and coming today to share with us the great work you're doing. So thank you so much.
Thank you too, and thank you to all your viewers.
And I just want to thank you for watching today's programme. This is a subject that I knew very little about until today, and this is why we got to support the incredible work of Leket in reaching out to the poor in Israel, providing them with the necessary food that they need to sustain life, and understand that this is a biblical concept right out of the book of Ruth. So I want to thank you for watching today's Middle East Report, and this song is dedicated to Ruth.
Like a stranger wandering far alone, my own, without a home, without a people, without a hope, without a prayer, without a way that I could follow. Then I turned and you were can know